All right, thank you. Welcome everyone to our fireside chat with Alex Niemeyer, the former senior partner at McKinsey. My name is Edward, and
my name is Fran. Hello, everyone.
And we will both be your host together for this session. So for this particular session, we have Alex with us today. Alex has been with McKinsey for about 22 years and is now teaching at the University of Miami. So if you have any question, feel free to post them on the Q&A box and we will pick them on as we go along. So not to hold the stage for you any longer, Alex, please introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your background.
Sure. No, thank you so much for having me, and big thanks to you, Ed, and Fran for organizing this and getting in contact with me and reaching out to me. I was delighted to accept this invitation because I have extremely fond memories of Cambridge. I never went to actually university there, but McKinsey would rent Cambridge University, a number of colleges every summer for a week. We would host our project managers there. So that's the people of about 3 to 4 years of tenure for like a leadership program. And I was faculty there like eight to nine times. So I spent 8 or 9 summer weeks in Cambridge, was always wonderful, enjoy the pubs. And then obviously being a physicist by background, kind of to eat in places where certain folks like Mr. Newton or Mr. Hawking have eaten, it's a nice thing. So I've always tremendously enjoyed it. I will clarify that I feel particularly good because I had a situation where I was punting on the cam and the pole got stuck in the mud. But at the very last tenth of a second, I decided, no, I need to let go because I'd heard the stories of the people where the boat leaves and you're still stuck and slide down. And with a lot of dance, I avoided that. So delighted to be here. So as Ed introduced me, I'm Alex Niemeyer. I'm a German national, but for the last 22 years, I've lived in Miami, in Florida, in the US, and joined actually, I was a physicist by background. I joined after my PhD straight into McKinsey. 2 years into that one, I did a 1-year short-term transfer to Miami, but to be a bit more international. My wife said, I'm not leaving Miami again, so feel free to stay. So I stayed, and I had a tremendous time at McKinsey. I really enjoyed it, and we'll chat about it a lot. I retired actually in 2018, and we can talk about why I retired. And so now I would call it about 70% retired. I do a couple of things. I teach a bit management consulting and analytics at the business school here at the University of Miami now. And I'm still a McKinsey senior advisor. So occasionally I help out on some things. And then I'm also on the value accelerator of Goldman Sachs private equity, where I take some of the skills that I've learned over the years and help kind of in helping make portfolio companies in private equity better. So I'm now seeing that side of the world also a bit. I'll shut up here and we'll go into the moderated part.
Yes, thank you, Alex. I think you made the right decision to let the fun off. Otherwise, you could have fallen down into the river. But it was a wise decision. So I think we'll first start the chat with a very fundamental question. I think consulting is a term that people have heard a lot, but it's something that many people don't know what do you actually do. So maybe could we start by hearing in your own words, what is a management consultant?
Yeah, so you're right. The word consultant is massively overloaded, as any computer science guy would say. And frequently when you sit on an airplane and you chat with somebody and they ask what you do, and you're saying, oh, I'm a consultant, say, oh, I'm a consultant too. I consult on nutrition or I consult on something. And because the word consultant doesn't mean very much, right? It means helping other people. So there's many different types of consulting out there. And management consulting is quite unique. So let me put it in contrast to other consulting. So there's a lot of IT consulting, as you guys are probably aware. So 90% of what Accenture does in their consulting arm is IT consulting, which means they implement IT systems. They configure like big software packages for entities. They train the users. They figure out how to configure them, put the business processes in. So it is highly advanced work, but it's also they bring a certain tool and you call them when they need a tool, when you need that tool and you want the best people to employ that. So it's kind of saying, I need a plumber, right? This thing needs to be rebuilt. I hire a plumber and they come and they're expert plumbers, but that's what they do. They do plumbing. And there's many others, like there's marketing consultants that do things, and there's analytics consultants that say, where you go, I have this analytics problem, can you solve this for me? Management consultant is different. management, the name says you work with senior management, and that's indeed what you do. But the key thing that's different about management consulting is that you work on problems that really nobody knows the answer to a large degree, right? So the whole idea is that you work on ill-defined things that are of great importance. And so the skill is not so much, I need to bring this deep technical expertise, or I need to have that technical, or I need to be the best cybersecurity guy or the best marketing guy. The skill is that you figure out, do we actually have a marketing problem? And so where obviously many of you kind of in enterprise science and technology, many of you are kind of fantastic problem solvers. But the problem solving is a bit different in the business world, in management consulting, in the sense that there may be no good answer to the problem. There may also be multiple good answers. So for example, you could say, hey, a company might come saying, look, we've seen declining profitability, we'll be bankrupt in 3 years if we don't change the way. What should we do? There could be 5 different things they could do, of which several might be mutually exclusive. It could be that it's not possible to save it because this industry is just heading downwind. And so it's working with senior management to figure out large problems that are ill-defined and quite vague. And I think the thing that's special about it is, because management consultants are expensive, and I'm sure we're going to cover that at some point, they only call management consultant if they've tried for a significant time to solve the problem themselves. And companies are not stupid. They hire very, very good people, but they couldn't figure it out. And obviously, by the time they hire you, it's also urgent. So the skill of a management consultant, the fundamental core skill, is to solve an ill-defined problem quickly and with priority and not make any bad mistakes, and then convince the client actually to act. We'll talk a lot probably about the challenge part of actually getting a client to implement anything, because if you just leave a piece of paper behind that sits on a bookshelf, you've added exactly zero value. So achieving impact is what a management consultant actually try to do. And the other consultant things like IT, marketing, the manufacturing, they are all employed as parts of that, but you figure out which pieces you need to bring together how, so that the whole thing works.
That's excellent, thank you. And so you mentioned that you work on problems that no one has the answer to. So how does the journey usually look when you navigate this uncertainty scenario?
Well, there's actually a methodology. How one of the things you learn as a management consultant is you learn how to solve these types of problems. And I actually teach that at our university now. The key thing is it sounds astoundingly simple, and it's like playing tennis or playing piano, right? I can explain. I don't play tennis. I play a bit of piano, and I can explain tennis to you, right? When the ball comes, you run in the right way and you hold your racket such with the right angle that the ball will drop into the other field as far away from the other player as possible, right? That's tennis. That doesn't make you a good tennis player, but it sounds very simple. So the tools of management consulting and the habits, it's much more an apprenticeship than anything else. It's not like when I teach my students these tools at the beginning, they go, well, that's it. And there's no book on this, because the book would be boring. It would be a 10-page article or something like that. It's the diligent skill in actually applying it. It's an apprenticeship. You need to get good at it. So one thing that you'll notice in all management consultancies, all good ones, is we don't care very much what you know already when we hire you. We care about whether you think, and you're willing to think well and kind of be diligent about things. And then we'll teach you everything on the job. There is no magical kind of, hey, secret stash of wisdom. And it's a skill that's not just related to management consulting. The reason, one of the key things, like we're going to talk about that for sure as well. Like the average person at McKinsey stays for 2.5 years. Your job offers from outside industry tend to start at 1 year. If you take 2 folks that were kind of equal after, say they're both MBAs, because obviously there's a fair amount of MBAs in this place. If you take 2 MBAs equally qualified and one goes into industry and one stays 2 years at McKinsey, BCG or Bain, I'm going to use McKinsey interchangeably here, guys. I'm not advertising. I will advertise for McKinsey, but the BCG and Bain are fantastic too. If somebody goes straight into industry and then somebody stays 2 years at McKinsey, the guy who went straight into industry may, if they're lucky, be kind of 2 years later, be a kind of a manager. The girl who's been at McKinsey for 2 years will probably get hired straight into a director or a vice president role. So if you think of the hierarchy of like analyst, manager, kind of senior manager, director, I don't know how familiar you guys are with this one. And the reason is that you've learned so much in those 2 years. The reason is that you've learned how to deal with complexities and people and organization that are just very hard to do. And the reason you learn it is because you get relentless coaching. That should be a topic we kick around here. The amount of learning and coaching you get while on the job in your from the year 0 to year 25 is quite amazing.
I think maybe one thing that always remains a mystery to me, Alex, is, and I don't think I found this anywhere. Like we spoke about how to solve the problem, but how did you first even as a partner get an engagement with the client, and how did you even have that initial conversation, and how did you convince them to, hey, let's work together on this problem with McKinsey?
That varies dramatically, right? A fair amount of stuff happens. So consulting today is a well-established industry, right? So a fair amount of stuff happens. The company says, I have some sort of problem and I know I need a consultant. Maybe it's something they do for example, redesigning a global manufacturing network. China tariffs change, there's unrest in Thailand, other people in kind of Mexico has unrest, and the company says we need to think about what we manufacture where globally. No company has people like that, because you only do this every 10 years. So like in consultants do it 10 times a year or 100 times a year. So the companies know that they need some outside expertise to think about their overall operation strategy. And what they do at that point of time is they actually have an RFP. They make a competition. They call up 5 consultancies and saying, this is our problem. We would like you to make a competitive presentation and we'll pick the one that we want to work with. So there's a fair amount of just competitive proposals that you have to do. That's not something associates in the first years and project managers get involved in very much. That's a lot what kind of partners do in competing. And this entire theme is more like at the partner level. The second thing is though that you tend to, and like our core belief at McKinsey is we do the right work for the client and we do great work every time. And if the client's ever unhappy, we'll likely not send a bill. So we're building relationships over time, and the relationships are enduring. In many cases, last 10, 20, 30 years. They last multiple generations of partners that work there. And you're not doing these relationships. They're not sales relationships. Actually, the word sales is forbidden inside McKinsey. They're relationships where you help the client all the time, but for a year, you may only help them with conversations. What do you think? What you should do? You may say, well, this is an important thing, but you can do that in-house, or this is an important thing. You should hire a small consultant, a cheaper consultancy to do that. But occasionally they'll stumble over something big one, and then we'll say, this is one way you should retain us. So it's an ongoing partnership to a large degree with a very, very long-term view. But for people starting out, so we can go arbitrarily deep into that topic, and obviously I'm happy to run it if you want to. But for people who are thinking about, do I want to be in consulting or not, that's something that's like 5 to 6 years in the future. So it may be less of an interest for the audience, rather than why would I even want to get into this in the first place?
Yeah, I think then that would be a really great place to get started with your journey of going from a PhD student to working in McKinsey for 22 years. And so our first question was, why did you decide to make that leap? What made you change from academic path to the consulting path?
Yeah, it's an interesting and somewhat random story. Like most good stories in life are somewhat random. You learn that as you get older. So I went and studied physics because I was passionate about physics. By the way, if I suddenly became 19 again or 18 and had to start over, I would study physics again. And so I loved it, and I was deeply drawn to theoretical physics. I did my master's and my PhD in string theory and loved that. So rather esoteric stuff, worrying about what happened like before the Big Bang and all that kind of beautiful stuff there. Absolutely fascinated about that. I was realizing though that as I was doing my PhD, and probably the realization came only in my kind of at the beginning of my last year of my 3 years there, I realized though that I would not be wanting to spend my life on research on that one. And part of my challenge has been I've always wanted to do multiple things. So in parallel to university, I had a software company doing computer algebra and medical image processing. So I always wanted to do multiple things. And I realized that the top physicists out there, they woke up in the morning at 7 to do physics, and they got to bed at midnight still thinking about physics. And that wasn't me. And I realized that's what it took. The other thing I realized is that because I was decent enough, but I wasn't a superstar in any way, shape, or form. What I was actually working on my PhD thesis, there were probably 15 people in the world that were interested in what I was doing or actually involved. And like on conferences, you would meet 40 people, but they were the same 40 people, and you would basically deal with that group of 40 people as they rejuvenated and some left and new postdocs came on and whatnot. And I realized I realized I would get bored. And if I'm bored, I do badly. I don't deal well with boredom. I just slack off and don't do anything. So I didn't know what to do. I was thinking of making my software company big, but the one good habit that I have is I reflect on what I actually like and what I don't like. And I'm pretty honest with myself. And I love the development part of it. I love the founding it and standing it up. And I hated dealing with customers day by day, every day, because the issues were routine. It was maintenance. And it's interesting when you look at CEOs, like I thought this about, like many people who join McKinsey think they want to be a CEO later in life. I think for me, it was the opposite. I think about 6 months in McKinsey, I realized I never wanted to be a CEO because they get a lot of money, but what they do is 90% of the time, 95% of the time, utterly boring. They mostly deal with fights and debates and disagreements and resettle those. Like the Steve Jobs kind of CEOs, they don't exist. I mean, those are like Six Sigma events out there, and the Elon Musks. That's not what you do. So I didn't want to be a CEO. So I realized I also didn't want to make my software company big. And so came this fateful day. I still remember standing in the hall. I know exactly in the physics department which hall where I stand. And I chatted with a friend, Zbigniew Plusienik, a Polish guy, wonderful guy. And I said, we talked about that we didn't know what to do. And I said, well, you know what would be really cool? I love solving problems. If only I could just work with companies. This is verbatim, guys. And it wasn't English because he was Polish. I said, if only there was a way where I could work with companies, solve interesting problems. And he kind of looked at me, 10-second silence, and said, Alex, you're the biggest idiot I've ever met. That job exists and it's called consulting. And I go, oh, really? Right. And and I think 2 weeks later, I had applied to BCG, McKinsey, and then I realized that it's probably not a good idea to put your hopes on just 2 companies, and apply to Anderson, which later became Accenture, and Monitor, and which is defunct for a long time, and Roland Berger. And I really wanted to go to, so that's how the idea for consulting started in my head. And then I read the brochures, and BCG was incredible. They did wonderful marketing to scientists, said all kinds of cool people. McKinsey marketing truly sucked, and said, oh, we work very hard, but the work is very rewarding. And so I was like young people are, this is the right, BCG is the right place to me. So I actually managed to get an interview at BCG, and in the second round, they actually told me they wouldn't take me. I was kind of devastated because that's what my heart was set on. But then McKinsey took me, and I was initially a bit skeptical, but then there was an epiphany, because we do for like PhDs, we do like a program a couple of weeks before you join or as you join. I did it before. It's called a mini MBA, where it was 3 weeks to 4 weeks at the time, now 3 weeks together with a bunch, like 40 other people. That know nothing about business, but are going to be let loose on the client in a short time. Very intense program, but fantastic. And I think on the 3rd or 4th day, I called my wife and I said, this is extraordinary. This is a group of 40 people. And normally when you put me in a group of 40 people, I really like 5. I can I'm okay with 10, and 20, I kind of 20 to 23, I don't want to deal with. I mean, I don't hate them, but they're not exciting to me. And I think 38 of the 39 people are my friends now, and they are marvelous. And one of them I'm kind of indifferent to, and that's never happened to me before. And so I suddenly realized I was in the right place. And then my first couple of years, most people, as I said, actually join McKinsey saying, I don't know whether I like it, I'll try it out. And I think three weeks into my first client, I realized this is what I wanted to do in life. And I would stay as long as they wanted to keep me, which is absolutely not a guarantee that they'll want to keep you. And I got very, very lucky. And they wanted to keep me until I decided that the lifestyle and family was finally in the way on that one. So that's a little bit the story and how I got there. So completely random.
I think it's always that random things that make life more fruitful and beautiful sometimes. Would love to hear as well, how was it like to be a PhD graduate in McKinsey? Because I presume most of your peers would probably have been MBAs or people who have been dabbling in businesses for years.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. I was actually ahead on some dimension. I was ahead on the problem-solving dimension, and the reason I was ahead is, and I think this maybe is somewhat specific to physics, but in physics, and I've seen engineers have more difficulty with it, because physicists are we're trained to think about what's important and what's unimportant. Like as a physicist, you go for those that have physics background here you're trained to go, oh, I can neglect this effect because this one is at least an order of magnitude. Our spherical cows, right? We know how to discard the unimportant part and focus the essence on the important part. And that's probably the key skill in problem solving as consultants. So I was ahead of that. I've seen engineers sometimes have difficulty with that, because the mentality of the engineering training is that you must not overlook anything. Right? It's more like everything has to be precise and everything, because that shows that you've done thorough work. And that's in a way a little bit. You can't do everything precise because there's too much to do. But in generally, people with our kind of background tend to do very well on the problem solving side. The people side, I knew nothing about. Right? It was people and communications, I think, was a major transition. And thankfully, and this is common, I had fantastic coaches and mentors. Coaching means that 8 times a day, somebody tells you what you just did wrong. And 8 may be an understatement. But it's still great, because you're getting that feedback not because somebody tells you screwed something up. You're getting that feedback because somebody wants to help make you better. So I think in Cambridge, you're like with your tutor system, right? For in the colleges where you work in small groups and you have somebody who challenges you, like you guys are exposed to that, and you know how much better it is than just being evaluated and said, hey, this is it, right? You know, you're challenged and you learn, you try something and you have some supervision and people coach you. So that is prevalent in the good management consulting companies. And so I remember, let me talk about communication and client and like people and client relationships. Communication is, scientists are trained to communicate the wrong way mostly. We're trained to communicate bottom up because we have to prove it, and it needs to be tied, right? So if I was at a seminar in physics, like you would start with like the textbook, like you might start with the Maxwell equations, and then you start writing and talking, and in minute 40 of the talk, in the last 5 minutes, you would do some magic, and the magic would lead to some result, and everybody in the audience, if you like, the greatest feeling was if everybody in the audience went, ooh, that's smart, right? You guys, I know, I see, by the way, you guys should put on your cameras. I'd love to see you guys. And people would go, oh, that's smart. But it was kind of a surprise. It comes as a surprise. There's that magical moment, and you strive for that, right? And when you're in the audience of such a talk, your entire energy is focused on thinking, why is that obvious, and how can I do that even faster so that I can raise my hand and then saying, but there's a much simpler way to get to the same answer. Why don't you do it that way, right? Then everybody would go, oh, you're smart. So it's a competition of wits. That is exactly the wrong strategy in pretty much every other aspect of life, right? When you speak, when you do like that in a business presentation where you need to convince anybody of something, people want to hear what you're going to tell them. So you start top down. You're saying, we recommend you do X. And then you say, why? And then you go, okay, so what are the simple reasons why? And then if they believe one of those whys, you may not have to present anything else of what you did there. They go, oh yeah, that's obvious to me. But your second why, that one is not. So tell me why do you make that second point? And you go one level deeper. So for the computer scientists here, it's kind of a breadth, like you start at the tree, top of the tree, and then you go, what's the next level? And then where necessary and where the client wants to, or where the audience wants to, you go down deeper selectively. And you may go very deep because it may be completely counterintuitive, but you don't waste your time on documenting everything and talking about everything. Because if you do that, the CEO will leave the room after 5 minutes saying, this meeting is wasting my time, right? The classical test of communication in all consultancies is the elevator test. You know how it works. You go, you probably know with your PhD advisors or something. You get in the elevator. You see the CEO coming. You desperately press the door close button, but the door close button only works for firefighters, so nothing happens. The CEO goes into the elevator with you and asks, so what are you finding? So how's it going? And you have 60 seconds to deliver a coherent message about where you are, and not one detail, but overall it's looking good. We're finding this, this, and this. That tells us it's likely this, but we still have questions on that, and therefore we need to do something. So providing synthesis, a coherence, and a very different approach. It's actually supremely logical. So for anybody on here, it will not be hard to learn, but it's a massive pattern shift. So communication is probably one big change that I had to learn from scratch. And also how you communicate in charts and on PowerPoint. There's a real science to that one. It's eminently logical. So once you've learned that, this is not hard to learn, it just takes practice. The thing that was hard for me to learn was people relationships. Because as I said before, in the sciences, on engineering, there is a right and wrong. Like if you disagree with me, but I can show you how the math works out, you're going to say, oh, I was wrong, you are right. And that doesn't happen in real life. I think I had an epiphany moment like 6 weeks in where my first client, we had a solution, we had a solution to one part of the problem. It was an obvious solution. It was easy to do. The clients had the capabilities to do this. The clients agreed that the solution was good and that it was the right one and that they would do it. And then 4 weeks later, so that was very early on. And then like around that 6-week mark, I go to my project manager saying, Dirk, I don't understand it. They said it's the right solution. They want to do it. They can do it. And they said they would, but they're not doing it. And I remember him falling to the floor laughing and saying, welcome to the world of actually influencing people. People are hard. Oh my God, people are hard, right? And individuals are smart. The general individual that you'll deal with is quite smart and has a quite good attitude, but organizations are not smart. Organizations are really, really, really stupid and can't get anything done. And I know that came as a shock to me. And I think I can illustrate it with my mother is a tiny bit a conspiracy theorist, by which I mean conspiracy theorist in the German sense, not in the US sense, which is batshit crazy, of course. But she would believe that large companies and like banks and stuff like that have like complicated secret things where they collaborate to make things happen in the world as they see fit. And I go, Mom, they can't even convince their salespeople to say what they want to say. Organizations are extremely incapable, but they need to be large. So the hard challenge is actually to make an organization change something. And it all boils down to incentives. Why will somebody do something and why it's different? And we think like as particularly at your age and where you are, you're usually excited about change because you've learned something new and you want to try it. And that's the minority of people. Even if it's great change, people don't like change because change always means giving something up. And so how to convince people and actually work on actually giving something up they're comfortable with and changing it is a really, really hard thing to do. And there's a lot of pattern matching and apprenticeship on how to read the room, how to understand what's going on, what incentives are. And incentives is not just money. Incentives is often capabilities, fears, hopes, distractions, maybe even in private life, but also very simple things like if things go like, here's a great example. Companies love spending $100 million on an IT system. Like they would scream at us if we said, oh, this transformation will cost you $3 million. And they would say, that's an outrageous price. The very same day, they turn around saying, we should spend $100 million on an SAP implementation. And you go, well, what's the business case for the SAP implementation? Oh, we think it's going to be great, but we don't really know. The reason they want to do that is because it postpones a problem 3 years down the road. Like the head of IT who does that, he's launched an SAP implementation. He will not be in that role any longer. It will be somebody else, and she will have to deal with the implementation. But who starts it? The person who starts it will not be in the role any longer. But they've looked productive, and there's zero risk to them, and they don't need to do anything else. So there's a lot of stuff, and you just need to watch your personal life, or maybe like the university department and how things are. The big Fortune 100 companies are no better when it comes to that. And so big skill of a good management consultant is actually to figure out how you build trust. Like you change things when you trust your advisor. So how you build the trust, how you help the client, how are you not being selfish? We often talk about it, the mentality of a consultant. You need to be a servant leader. You actually need to enjoy helping other people. If you want fame, you do not become a management consultant. The best thing that can happen to you is if at the end of the project, the client says, yeah, actually, we didn't really need these guys. We figured this all out on our own. And then you are very, very proud because that client is more likely to do the stuff than if they say, well, McKinsey tells us we should do X. I remember one study for the Florida lottery, actually, I can't use client names, obviously, but this case I can because it's public. And at the end of that study, the head of the lottery turned to me and said, Alex, I just wanted to make sure we're not legally required to follow McKinsey's recommendations, are we? And I went home completely dejected because, you just wasted 3 months of very hard work in something that for political reasons they had no desire in implementing, right? That's the frustrating part. So there is you're not, as a consultant, you're not in control, you're only advising. And if people, you're a little bit like a doctor telling people to stop smoking, but it doesn't always work.
Yeah, definitely. It just made me think when you were mentioning that, if you're looking for fame, consulting is not for you.
No.
Within this context, who will you not recommend management consulting to? If you want to get into management consulting, yeah.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. Number one is certainly, so it is an intense profession, right? And there's real lifestyle implications. So you can be in town to a significant percentage, but you'll never ever be, if you're a good management consultant, for the very reasons I just laid out, you need to be with clients. Zoom is not going to change that. Zoom is going to change stupid stuff. Like I've flown for a 2-hour meeting to Paris from Miami that got canceled when I landed and flew back. I've flown for a 2-hour meeting to China. Zoom is going to kill all COVID, and Zoom thankfully kill all that. But I was like, I chose my clients based on what the problem was and who I wanted to work with. I didn't choose them based on geography. So you can think of where do I want to work? Which industry do I want to serve? Which people do I like working with? What kind of topic would I like to work on, etc. And so, yeah, there's 4 or 5 dimensions, and you can make 2 of them work. There's a lot of freedom, but you can't make all 4 work. So my choice was always the people I worked with and the subject matters that I worked on, because I was fascinated by certain things, but not by others. And as a result, I was 22 years, and that's the reason I in the end retired. I was 22 years, I didn't have a single in-town client ever. So like I would leave Monday mornings and I would come back Thursday nights. And as an associate, you're usually in one city because you're in the same city, you're doing one project. But then as a partner and later senior partner, I was on a plane every evening. Like every evening I would go from one city to the next. My wife didn't even bother to ask me any longer where I was, because it would change. Like on Tuesday, I would say I got to be in Houston on Thursday, but I would actually end up in Albuquerque or something like that, or in Amsterdam or whatever. So if you're not willing to travel and be away from home, do not become a management consultant. Right? It doesn't work because you can't have impact. You don't have impact by phone. And there's some management consultancies that say, yeah, but the first 2 years you can work from an office at home and just you're kind of an analyst for the team. And I can see that appealing to people, but that also means you're not learning how to interact with clients and you're not getting all that coaching I just talked about a moment ago. So I would strongly recommend you not do that. Now, if that's the only position you get, you should absolutely take it. I think they're all great, but that's one thing. So you do need to be ready to travel. I think the second thing is you need to actually be excited by uncertainty and by the possibilities. So like there's people whose mentality is, I want to wake up in the morning knowing that I have all the capabilities of doing my job, and what is going to come, I know a way to do it, and I can just go ahead and do it and be done with it, right? And that is not what management consulting is. I would say it took me I commented about it to a friend at some point of time. I think it took me 17 or 18 years to get to the point where just before the start of a study, I didn't go, oh my God, what if we can't solve this problem or if we don't find this opportunity, right? That nervousness and stuff changes on you. Like you start this thing with this question and 4 weeks later you go back to the client saying, you're asking the completely wrong question. Your real question is X. And then the client either shifts completely or says, we'll do that later. But so there's healthy debates and sometimes you walk away from stuff. So you need to be able to enjoy, not just deal with uncertainty. I think that's your motivation because you work in extremely cool projects and fascinating stuff with people that you otherwise would never meet in a normal job. I mean, I met my first CEO and thought about how when I was like 3 weeks into McKinsey. Right. And I ran my own project at the business unit 6 weeks. They sent me to the Italian business unit. So suddenly I was in Milano working with a subsidiary of a company there on basically a loan for significant parts of it. So it's opportunities you don't get elsewhere. But you have to enjoy that. And not all people enjoy that. The third dimension I would say is you need to be wanting to do that live on your feet. So you don't have to be an extrovert. Actually, the majority of partners at McKinsey are introverts. Introvert in the sense of where they get their energy from. But you need to be comfortable with having extroverted conversations with clients. And this is a challenge I see frequently in my consulting club. Like they go, I hear you, and now I want to go off for an hour to think about what you've said and then come back. And that doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. I mean, you'll do a lot of thinking, but when you are in an interactive discussion with the client asks you, what do you think? You can say, I don't know and move on, but you can't say, let me go away and think about it when you're having a live conversation. So it's a contact sport. It's involved and you have to enjoy that. Otherwise you'll be full of angst kind of every day of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think thinking on your feet definitely is a skill that we all need to develop. And with that spirit, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them and we'll unmute you. I have one question from Sophia. Alex, she was asking about the difference in intensity of consultancy compared to completing a PhD.
This is going to be embarrassing. It's vastly like I think half the time of my PhD. So now I was smart. I did my PhD in theoretical physics, so I wasn't helping anybody. What I did was was for myself essentially, and so I would say I worked half time doing my PhD, but then I also worked. I spent half my time I spent on a software company. Consulting is an intense job. You should not expect that you will work under 50, 60 hours a week. But it also doesn't necessarily feel like work.
Got it. I just see a hand from Grace. Grace, can you try to unmute yourself? All right.
Yes. Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. My question is about the social sector and prioritizing social impact problems. I'm curious how McKinsey prioritizes social sector work in addition to private sector work.
Yeah.
and maybe like what this prioritization looks like in terms of time allocation for employees. And kind of the bulk of my question is really about whether or not you can kind of pave a full-time social sector career path in consulting, or whether or not that will always kind of just be part of your job.
No, you can. And it's actually much simpler than that. McKinsey does not have an organization. As a new associate, you do not work for anybody. You don't report to anybody, sorry, I should say. And as a senior partner, nobody reports to you. Teams are formed basically on a free market. And some mid-tier consultancies do it differently, but McKinsey and I think BCG to a large degree does it. We are a group of people that seek out things that we want to work on and people that we want to work with. And there's a sizable group that wants to work on social sector stuff, and they do, right? And they do some. So we had a couple of folks in the Miami office, and that really wanted to work on school. Like schooling in the US is pretty broken, in my opinion, and they wanted to work on that one, and they did. And over time, you can make whatever you want your platform to be. You can say, that's my platform. The only hurdle McKinsey puts at you in front of it, it's eventually, meaning within a few years, it ought to be successful. Like you can't say I want to do this, but in the end, not find a client who is willing to pay for that one. So we do an enormous amount of social sector work, schools, governments, so infrastructure. Actually, the Florida lottery program that I talked about earlier was in some sense social sector work, because it funds the goal was to increase the funds for education, which lotteries in the US kind of fund education, which is very scary. You take the money from the people who are bad at math and put it into education, but not going to go there for much deeper. And so you can absolutely do that. And there's people that serve government entities, NGOs. I think my most exciting story is not my personal, but we changed the election system for the Pope, right? Because there was one McKinsey person and so a pre-partner, associate partner, and he was in seminary before he joined, and he had some connection to the Vatican. And you guys are all way too young, but I remember like 23 days of black smoke until the new Pope came. And he actually reached out and said, we need to change that. And the fun story is that the election, the way the new Pope is elected is actually to a significant degree modeled on how the McKinsey managing director is elected. So here's your side bit of information on that one. But things like that. So you seek out your own passions, Grace, right? And you do what you want to do. And the other thing we do is we do a reasonable amount of pro bono work. So where we work with organizations. So I forgot the names on my tongue, but there was a big global program that I think by now has created 200. It was about educating people for the more modern workforce, and it's created like 250,000 kind of job closures and stuff like that. So people do that, but pro bono work is not something you can do all your time. That's like a project you do occasionally. But in the end, it's a profit organization, very clearly so. And all consultancies are there, but social sector has very high value problems. Like, how do you think better about benefits and social services and all kinds of that? Like the NHS has been a huge client over the years, because if you can do more medical services with less money, or with the same amount of money or less money, that's good for everybody. So huge amount of work.
Thank you, Alex. I think there's a question from Shed. Shed, would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi, thank you. So my main question is that a lot of us will be studying at the moment. And so I wanted to ask, what kind of skills can we develop within ourselves during our university time that you think would make us better placed to succeed in a career as a management consultant? Are there any skills or experiences you think students who want to go into management consulting should really look at developing?
Yes, and I would, thanks for that question, Ed. And I would elevate it a bit if you want to succeed in almost any profession. Like, and this group is a very elite group, right? I mean, Cambridge, the best university in the world, and you guys collectively will shape the world to quite some substantial degree. And so regardless whether you want to become a management consultant or not, working with people is a major thing. Understanding, so seeking out collaboration. Like we all know the student projects that you get assigned where two people never show up and one does it on the weekend. Like there's a fair amount of head nodding there. Like real life doesn't work. The leaders are those that can actually make those teams functional and get something done. And that's a very advanced skill, because it's not just being the smart, it's actually rarely being the smartest on the team, but creating a sense of purpose, prioritizing the work, so the problem solving aspect comes to in what's important to do, what's not important to do, and then pulling that together and communicating it well, but also keeping people informed. So the only way to learn that is through apprenticeships. So number one is I would seek out opportunities where you can do something with other people and see that as a separate learning objective as it's in itself, not just we have to do it as a team because somebody told us to. And then ideally get coaching. Like that, I think that's my second piece of advice is seek mentors and seek coaches. And so you all are in situations, in Cambridge, as I said earlier, is better than this than most other places in the world, but you're getting feedback. It's actually an art to get feedback, because the temptation when you get feedback is always to explain, well, you didn't like what I was, or you thought I could have done this better, but there was a reason why I did it this way, right? That sounds familiar. That is a cardinal mistake. Have you, I presume some of you have given other people feedback. Is it comfortable to give other people feedback? I mean, guys, it would be much better if more people can switch on the camera. It's going to be a much better dialogue. But giving other people feedback is not a comfortable thing to do, right? You hesitate. You don't want to get their reaction. And so knowing that actually feedback is a gift, is the official word, but it's actually true. Like it's not even, there's evaluative feedback. Like there's probably somebody who wants to tell you did a bad job, right? That's not fun. But most people want to give you feedback because they care about you and they think you can do better. And so when you get feedback about how to do something better, you don't explain why kind of you did in that moment, or why they didn't understand the conditions under which you did that, and therefore you say thank you. And ideally you ask, what do you think I should go and change? Like what would you have done? What do we have? So seek out mentors, and you seek out mentors by seeking feedback, because then the person, like, think the reverse way. If you have a person that listens to you, like you're willing to do whatever. Most of us are willing to do whatever. Right? Ed wrote me, and let's take this case. Ed wrote me a note saying, "Hey, kind of was interesting. You read the Quora thing that I did, right?"
Yeah, you read a lot of things in Quora.
And he said, "I care about what you have to say," and here I am, kind of spending a fair chunk of my time doing something that I enjoy because Ed asked, right? Had Ed never asked, kind of this wouldn't count. So seek out. The best, there's quite a bit of research that says the best way to gain somebody's trust is not to do them a favor, but to ask them for a favor. It's very counterintuitive, but if you reflect on it, it's actually true. So ask people for a small favor. Hey, I'm giving a presentation. Could you watch me and give me some feedback? I'm actually interested in getting better at presenting. Could you give me some feedback afterwards? And not tell me, oh, that was pretty good or that was bad, but saying, I noticed when you opened up, you repeated that 5 times, right? And then I noticed you always looked only at the same person when you're talking. I would recommend that you go around. And I noticed that you were reading your slides one by one instead of speaking about them. Right? Invite people to actually do that to you, and you'll get a lot of learning. I think there's nobody in McKinsey, it's kind of forced on you in a massive way, and that's what gets you there. When you meet somebody like 6 weeks in, or no, 8, or maybe 2 months in or so, there was a new associate on my team suddenly, somebody who'd just been hired, and I was shocked on how much I knew and could coach him. At that time, because I'd learned so much in those 8 weeks. So that's a universal skill to learn, and it's a pure practice one. Certainly any presentation opportunity or whatnot. The other thing to get good at is approximate math, numeracy, I think is the right way. You guys, many of you will have natural strength in that one, but the ability to say, yeah, I would expect that number to be in the millions of pounds and not in the tens of millions of pounds, because should be like maybe 10% of the UK population will do this, and I expect they spend 100 pounds on it a year, more or less. So the being plus minus 30% wrong on every assumption, but multiplying the right things together and doing the judgment. Great way to practice that is newspapers. Whenever a newspaper writes any number, for me it's now automatic. I go, that number sounds right, or that number sounds wrong. And if it sounds wrong, I'm doing the math and I go, you guys are like, half of the stuff that's in newspapers is wrong, unless you're like reading Economist or something like that. They take care. But like the Generalist magazine or so, they don't know what they're writing about, right? When somebody says to you and saying, whoa, so-and-so gets £2,000 a year for this, and you go, that can't be right, right? And then you look it up and you find, so getting facility, because very few people have that. And it's actually an extremely powerful thing to sit in a business leader's role or in a nonprofit, it doesn't really matter, and saying, I have an intuitive sense and a fast sense where I don't need to go away for 2 weeks to figure out what matters and what doesn't matter. Right? Your customers, like your competitors, are lowering the price and one customer group is moving away. Should you be very worried or not, right? Because if you lower the price, everybody gets a lower price. So an instantly saying, well, who is that customer group? What percentage is it? How fast are they moving away? Should I do this? Are those actually customers I wanted to keep? That becomes a habit. So thinking of problems, said to finish up there your question there, sorry for talking so long, but there's rich stuff. Think about problems you're officially not an expert on, and coming to and solving it with the basic numbers, because these are numerical, like everything in life is in the end a numerical problem to some degree, right? Even incentives and behaviors are to some degree numerical problems. And thinking about problems that you supposedly don't know about, but coming to reasonable conclusions is great practice for any job you ever want to have. Has nothing to do with management. Management consultants are just particularly good at it.
Alex, I'd like to just follow up on that last comment of yours, which is to practice solving something that is beyond your field. This is related to Nohdin's question. Like PhD typically are trained to solve a particular problem for 4 years. Yeah. So if you join McKinsey, what would you be expected to do? Would you be expected to work on a specific project, like maybe as an expert, or would you be a more generalist where you get to work with multiple things?
So the fundamental core is always that you join as a generalist. So nobody, and strangely enough, there was no client that wanted to know about like string effects at the beginning of the universe. I don't know why. I think that's a mistake, but they didn't want to know anything about it. So no, the typical answer is that your first projects will be on topics you don't know much about. Now you can get lucky. If you studied engineering, there's a good chance you will, like if you study mechanical engineering, and there's a decent chance you'll be working on operations or manufacturing projects, and you'll know a little bit about it. But in general, you don't know anything about it. And you work on one project. As an associate, you work on one project at a time. For the first couple of years, first 3 years or so, you're unlikely to ever work on 2 projects in parallel. And so no, you get assigned, like early on you join, and then at the beginning you get assigned a work stream, right? So my first problem was the special steel industry, which I didn't even know existed. It's like tooling steels and all kinds of actually quite interesting steels. So very specialty, like not like normal steel where the kilogram costs like two pounds or so, but like steels where a kilogram can cost 60 pounds or more, like carbides and whatnot. And kind of, they were very successful, but they had way too much capital tied up with them. So we needed to take, what was it, 150 million euros back then, I'm translating obviously the numbers, out of inventory, about a 20% reduction. How do you do that? So we needed to look at the way the plant produced stuff, the scheduling, the forecasting of the sales, the products we offered. And I was assigned fairly early and saying, hey, why don't you think about the products we offer? So I did a lot of analysis, what was selling, how well, how predictable was it? So my numerical skills were quite useful, but there was no specific content skill that I needed before. And then my next study was I can talk about that name because it's so long ago, was the globalization strategy for Audi. Audi was very big in Germany. This is, we're talking late 90s. Was very big in Germany, but internationally they were not doing very well. Like BMW, Mercedes were doing better, particularly in the US, and Audi wanted to change that. And I know how to drive, but that was as much as I know about the car industry. So you had to think about, the key part is often, what is actually the problem? Like when I say the globalization strategy for Audi, what does good actually look like? Does it mean everywhere they are being sold? Or does it mean they're sold everywhere profitably? But does everywhere include states like Singapore and Malaysia? Because they thought at the time it did, and they were building Audis, disassembling them and shipping the parts to Singapore to reassemble, Malaysia to reassemble them. Was that good? So they got a brand in Singapore, but was it good or bad? Singapore is important, but it's tiny, right? So, in many cases, figuring out what is actually the question is the hardest part of the whole thing. And that may change, and you often revise in the middle of the work. You're going, actually, we've been asking the wrong question. That's part of the fun of rethinking everything. And then you have to throw away a lot of stuff that you already did and start over.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. We are actually getting a lot of questions about this. I think maybe a lot of people are thinking, well, then what am I doing the PhD for? If I want to, if I want to specialize in something like medical consulting, then should I join McKinsey, or am I going to be forced to do generic things from the beginning?
You're not forced, because you very quickly pick what you want to work on. So if you want to be in medical consulting, like I'll tell you one story. We had one guy, Alex Dichter, who was a former airline pilot, and he says, I only want to work for airlines. It's the only thing I want to do. And everybody said, Alex, that's a really stupid idea, because you can only serve one airline per country because of competitive. I mean, you're not allowed to serve competitors, of course, right? Actually, you may only serve like one airline per continent. And he went, I don't care. Like, and he got hired 2 years after me, but he made senior partner a year before me, and he leads our transportation practice today. Right. So I just talked to him last week. And so you can have, like, there's tons of people that exclusively work on pharmaceuticals. Right. I chose I thought strategy was my like when I joined the McKinsey, strategy was kind of that's the Olymp. That's where you want to be. And everything else is like little kind of sideshows, right? It's interesting enough, since McKinsey is about 3 to 4 times as large as we were when I joined. And our strategy work compared to when I joined has not grown. And my strategy work, like once I did the Audi strategy work, I realized that I personally found strategy work extraordinarily boring. And some people think it's the highest thing. And I never did strategy again because I chose not to. Like over time, I fell in passion with supply chain, like mostly actually the end-to-end of info, all the stuff that's going wrong right now. The reason why you have empty shelves, or at least in the news, England has empty shelves, and how to solve those things, which I initially was attracted to because I thought my analytical capabilities would give me an advantage, and which I then came to realize is actually almost exclusively people problems. Like all the supply chain stuff is 15% math, and it's 85% people and incentives and behaviors. And I started to enjoy that. And so I gravitated to that. I did more and more of that. And I ended up leading our global supply chain practice because of some stuff that I invented and new service lines that we built. So you absolutely do what you want to do, right? But early on in the first year or so, we would always strongly recommend that you explore, because you may not know what you like to do. Like I would never have believed I wanted to do supply chain. I would have said, yeah, that sounds cool, but I want to do strategy, or I want to do organization and marketing. And I realized I didn't want to do these things because I tried them. I think a general piece of very important life advice is that, like, work with serendipity. When something interesting comes along and it's not a big cost to try it, because you might turn out that it's the stuff you like. And and many colleagues, people that I know share the same thing. If you always shoot for what exactly you think is what you want to do, you will be disappointed typically, because things never are as they seem to be from the outside.
I think that's I think that's a very useful advice, to work with serendipity, especially for PhD candidates who are thinking of changing their career. We'll move on to the last section of the fireside chat, which is a bit more on the future of consulting. You've been in this industry for more than 2 decades, Alex. What do you think, how is management consulting going to change in the next decade, in your opinion?
Oh, the next decade is very hard to predict. Let's talk about some of the things that have changed, right? When I joined, I was just at the tail end, I think, of the original era, which was smart people that don't know anything about you. And actually, literally, that was how my first partner introduced me at my very first client kickoff, like 3 days after I joined. And he said to the special steel client I mentioned earlier, and he said to the client, saying, just so you know, this team here doesn't know much about special steel, and they don't know much about inventory management. So they'll take like a couple of weeks to come up to speed. But trust me, in the end, it will work out great because they are really smart people. And he was absolutely right. Within 2 weeks, we know more about this than this company who'd done this for 130 years ever did. Right? So he was absolutely right. But if you said that today to a client, they would walk you out of the building. Like, the management consulting became much more established in the last 20 years. And companies have hired, like every significant company has hired at least 10, 15 former management consultants by now. And so like many of the fundamental basics actually exist in companies. So expertise has become much more relevant, right? So today, when I do this, when I did this, like when you do a manufacturing study today, you expect that your team is configured of mostly, not exclusively, but mostly of people that actually have been there and done that already several times. And you have advanced tools that you bring to bear, saying, we've researched this and we know how to do this and we have new approaches and whatnot. And there's always like one or two, and that's accepted. There's always one or two young new consultants who have not yet, who are just joined, who don't know that, but learn it as part of that. And once you've done something twice, you usually know more than any client ever will. Right, so you grow up really, but expertise is meant, and this has led to actually the decline of all the small generalists. So I mentioned Monitor at the beginning. Small generalist management consultants no longer exist because they cannot provide, like I talked briefly about competing on proposals. Like if you need an expert on polar shipping in the Arctic shipping, I can bring somebody to a proposal who has done 10 studies and has seen 15 aspects of polar shipping. If you are a 100 partner or 50 partner kind of boutique consulting company that maybe have brilliant people, you cannot possibly compete. So what has happened is that all the small ones have died. McKinsey was the first to lead that change and recognize that, and grew actually. Then BCG, noticing that they were falling behind significantly, invested hell and high water to grow, because with the scale you can do this. And actually it was nasty for a while because they would routinely come in. BCG and McKinsey would always be priced the same kind of because they were always saying we're as good as McKinsey. And so they were always priced the same. And there was a 4-year period where they priced everything 30% lower. Like they would say, we do the same study, but they would go to my clients when we had studies underway and saying, why don't we take over and we'll give you a 50% discount. And that was actually quite smart because they grew to where they, again, about 2/3 of McKinsey's or a little bit more than half of McKinsey's size. And they can now have scale as well. They can't have scale like in operations, you would never use BCG. But like in marketing and digital stuff, they are equally good as McKinsey, and in some other areas they might be better. So scale has become important. And so of the management consultants, there's really only 3 survivors: Bain, BCG, and McKinsey. Everybody else is usually specialized, right? They are much more niche. And they they go like we are retail management consultants. So we know, so they basically took one of those segments and focused on that one. And then Booz Allen died and was acquired. Well, it was about to die and then acquired by Price Waterhouse. And some other folks kind of died, and Oliver Wyman specialized, kind of Ollie White specialized. So they either went specialized or you grow, but you couldn't be small. So that has changed the landscape quite substantially. I think what's coming now is, and this is new, well, probably last 4 or 5 years, is digital transformations have become a feasible thing. Like the data has always existed. Since I joined, the data was there, but the tools weren't interoperable enough. But today, in a very short, like when we said before, we need to put like a new marketing thing out there or something. Today you can, new marketing analytics. Today you can plug together SaaS service, software as a service platforms very quickly. There's lots of providers, and do things in a month today that took a year to do before. And so that's changed. So all consultancies are heavily investing into that one. Not necessarily to compete, but making sure you can also bundle these things together and put them together. And I think that's a significant. Oh, the other trend that has happened, sorry, that was a big one I forgot, is implementation. I was also at the tail end of, and like in the 80s, up to the 80s, from the 20s to the 80s in last century, consulting was about, we do the study and we give you a book in the end and we tell you that's the great answers, you should go do this. And then I think people realized that in 50% or less of the cases, anything was actually implemented. And then they realized a lot of it is because not the client doesn't want to, but doesn't know how. It doesn't actually, implementation is changing people, as I said at the beginning, and it's very hard to do. So like McKinsey invested a tremendous amount, probably more than 50% of our work in some way would be implementing and capability building. We don't implement something for everybody, but for example, we would work with a sales force in like 1 or 2 locations to show how it should be done and show the results while training up their own trainers so that they could roll and building the infrastructure that they could roll it out, right? So it's massively increased impact. And so like I have like if I look at my highest impact study, it was a 4-week effort, but it delivered $1.6 billion of value to the client. Right? Because we identified something and we trained them up how to do it, and they successfully implemented it and saved $1.6 billion on something they couldn't do before. And so if that was the only impact, that's one of the nice things I want to talk about, the satisfaction of consultants. Like I can list 3 studies, 4 studies individually. If nothing else that I ever did had ever worked out, I'd still made a gigantic change, like 50 times more than the money I earned collectively. Like if only this client had given me 1% of what they make, kind of my entire life savings. So you can have not everything works, and it's a bit of a lottery. Like, but enough stuff works, and the problems are big enough that you'll never feel bad about the impact that you'll have as a person. And like I fly a lot, and so I'll make that one comment. And I don't know. I know there's some people with German names on here, but I don't know whether you've ever met the prototypical German environmentalist in my time. That was the brown, the hand knitted. Ideally, you've shorn the sheep yourself. And so I had lots of friends like that, and they would attack me of you're flying all around, kind of all the carbon impact you're having on the world. And I'm carbon negative. I have like several companies, and just to list one, we saved them an easy $15 million a year in fuel by routing their stuff better. I can be on an airplane circling the rest of the world for the rest of my life, and I'll be massively carbon negative relative to others. So you can achieve things that you can't achieve elsewhere. But so the implementation focus, to come back to your question, sorry for the detour there, is a major thing, and that will continue to be there. And then there will be new things that I have no idea what they might be.
Yeah, thank you. That was a really good answer. Thank you. So within this changing landscape, we know that there's some people here who may be first years, so they're just starting the university, either as a PhD or as an undergraduate. But how do you think the skills required to be a management consultant will change within this changing landscape? Or would you recommend them to continue working on the skills that you have recommended us before to work?
I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't change anything. I think today you probably need to more, but that will not be challenged to 90%, or you need to have more facility with numbers and data than you used to have. And actually that's a significant advantage, because compared to like the MBAs, and sometimes it's little things. but compared to like MBAs tend to be really bad at math, at least compared to anybody who went to a technical or kind of did a technical or scientific degree. They're really bad, but they also tend to be really bad with data. So if you have a heads up on that, it's a unique advantage. And what I'm not talking about is advanced algorithms like machine learning or neural networks or random forests or decision tree. Those are actually not used almost, they're like, other than in the big .com retailers, they are not used, or Facebooks, they are not used anywhere, because the benefit is too tiny to do. The stuff that's really needed is the ability to think about what problem am I trying to answer? Does data exist that can actually help me answer it, and then get it and then clean it? And this is the other dirty secret. Like data scientist, like probably 70% of the time of a data scientist goes into preparing and cleaning data, because it's messy and it's completely useless until that's done. So having some basic skills, kind of like if you don't know Python and pandas kind of for data, that's a very useful skill to happen for like most jobs out there, in particular probably for management consulting.
Thank you, Alex. I think this has been a great session. You've given us a lot of advice, but just as our last question to close today's talk, do you have any last advice for aspiring management consultants here among us?
I'm not sure there's anything I haven't shared yet. So I'm happy. I don't know what your timeline is, so I'm happy to take more questions if you want to. Your call.
I guess like I'll throw that ball back to the audience if you have any other specific questions. I know there are questions about how to ace the interview, as well as the differences between McKinsey.
You want me to talk a bit about the case interviewing process?
Are you? Yeah. If you're okay, then.
Is that of interest? Check if it's not of interest.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. I'm sure it will be of interest to everyone.
Yes.
So, like the case, and I've done well over 500 case interviews because it's consultants doing them. So the case interview. So first thing is you have to. So I give you some hard numbers, and they're not very encouraging, right? The ratio of applications to people that get hired is worse than 1 in 100, right? And this is all mostly top-notch people applying, and those are the numbers, and this is what they are. The first hurdle is to get over the resume screen, right? Because interviewing somebody for McKinsey costs maybe in the order of magnitude of $10,000, because you're taking a lot of time from consultants that otherwise would be working on clients. Like, and we have to interview. I think we make like in the order of 1 to 5 to 1 to 8 is the conversion rate of people that get interviewed to offers, right? So the odds are not good, right? And a BCG turned me down, as I explained before, and the fact that I did make it to senior partner at McKinsey would like me to tell me that they made a hiring mistake. But we're actually very happy. We're quite deliberate about that one. We only hire people that that at least the interviewers feel absolutely sure about. If there is the slightest doubt, we go no. And because while interviewing somebody costs 10,000 or so, hiring somebody who turns out to be not the right fit is an extremely expensive mistake, because clients get unhappy, the person is unhappy, the team that has that consultant on is unhappy. So we try to make zero type 1 errors, but as a result, we make lots of type 2 errors, if you want to call it that. So basically, so you should absolutely expect when you apply that even if you get to an interview, you will not be taken, even if that's not at all your fault. I'm still wondering why BCG didn't take me. I think it might be one case. I'm still 25 years later wondering about that one, and I haven't figured it out. But that is what it is. So the key thing though is to get to the resume screen first. And once you get to the resume screen, actually what's on your resume no longer matters. We literally don't read it any longer or don't care, because once we interview you, we're fine. We're checking that out ourselves. On the resume, what matters is, one is obviously kind of, are you smart? So do you have consistently good, and are you willing to put into it what it takes? So consistently great grades is kind of a almost minimal hurdle. That's just the fact of it. The second thing we would like to see on a resume is that you're not just a good student who does what they're being told. Or if you have work experience, that you're not just a good employee. Like, we're looking for leaders. You need to independently lead a client. You need to independently, we don't hire anybody at McKinsey that we don't think has the potential to make partner. Nobody ever gets hired because we say, yeah, they'll be a good 2-year associate and then they'll probably kind of top out. We're not doing that. So we're looking for people who have the energy to change something. So if you have any stories in your life, either socially or in a work environment or at university or in your personal life, where you said, here's something where I overcame something difficult and where I actually worked on things, and didn't give up. Not giving up, that's an important fact to put on your resume, to kind of embed in your resume. And I think this is where a PhD helps massively, because most PhDs have ample opportunity to give up, but don't. Right? That's why it's actually such a good filter. It's in an environment that changes all the time. Like a PhD has demonstrated that he or she can put the energy in to drive this to completion through many frustrating moments, which is exactly what consulting is, driving something completion through many frustrating moments. Then you come to the actual case. I'm trying to answer two to three cases in that case, questions in that case. It's very simple. Number one is, can this person solve the problem? Number two is, do I want to send that person to a client? Can I send the person to a client and it will look good? And number three is it actually a nice person I want to be with? And that's why consultants do the interview and not HR. Like you're going to end up spending 50 to 70 hours in the team room with that person. And that can be the most brilliant person, but if they're obnoxious or arrogant, you do not want to be around them. So I've turned down so many candidates that clearly had the potential to be wonderful consultants, but thought they were little gods, and you don't want them around. So being a friendly person matters actually a lot, because clients need to get trust. Number two is, we're checking obviously as part of the case interview whether you can have an engaging conversation with us, right? Because that tells us that you're comfortable in front of the client. You're not kind of only looking at the page. So some basic human interactions there. But the problem solving part is the case interview, right? And so we don't expect anything. We don't expect that you know anything about the industry or the case. What we want to see is whether you can take an unstructured problem and do essentially four things. The first thing is, can you actually define what the problem actually is? And sometimes that's an obvious question. They will tell you, should we buy this company or not? Or should we launch this product or not? But should we launch this product is not a clear question. What would have to be true for you to launch this product? Is it because it's more profitable than anything else we've done? Or it's just marginally profitable? Or it gives us better reputation, right? So thinking about what actually means, what does success actually mean, is most people don't think about that. The bigger parts then though are, number one is structuring. When I ask you, should we buy this company or not? You can come up with a list of things that matter. Not answers, not at all answers, but you can say, well, it would depend whether this company is overall going to be profitable, going to add to our profitability, right? So, so there is the company itself, and then there's the synergies between us, and synergies might be in customer overlap, or it might be that I can take some cost out, and it might be that I can take out the legal department, like make one legal department. So you come up with a list, and what we want to see is, again, in computer science, we want to go breadth. You need to go breadth first. Don't go down one idea that you just have heard about. Oh, they need to do a digital transformation. And then you go down, how do you know that? Right? Well, no, it's just, I know that's very relevant. Yeah, but we don't care what you've heard elsewhere. So no, to make the decision whether to buy the company, I need to know about what will happen to the revenue, what will happen to the customer base, what will happen to the overlap between the two companies, how much cost can I take out, do I have how much capital will this company demand to invest in? So it's just basic lists. And we want to see that you get structured in that list. So you're saying, oh, there's sides on the revenue side, there's sides on the cost side, there's sides on the investment side. This is where some of the books offer frameworks. Frameworks are fine, but don't force fit a framework that doesn't work. Many cases don't have that obvious framework. And then then afterwards, the interviewer will tell you, okay, good list. Now we'll ask you to focus on just the pricing aspect of things, like how we can change price. And usually they will show you some data, and there will be so the first part was like the structural part, and then there's a quantitative part where we'll ask you to do some math. Like, you want to double the market share, and you want to double more than double the number of stores, and the demand per customer is expected to grow by 70%. What will happen to sales per store? So it's simple math for anybody on here. It's probably fairly simple math in the sense, okay, so there's 3 factors. I need to add these 2 together and multiply them by the third, and then actually do the numbers in your head or basic on paper in a rounded fashion. So a year has 50 months, 2 is about 1. So again, that's what physicists do naturally, and drive that through. And then in the end, there's a third part, and these parts may be intermixed, which is about synthesis, which is, I've just focused you on one piece of pricing, but can you step back and meet the CEO in the elevator and saying, well, I think overall it's looking good. We saw that there's plenty of opportunity to raise prices because of such and such. We think there may be other synergies that we still have to study. So it's too early to tell, but overall it looks, the direction is, yes, you should buy that company, right? Can you stay at the top before you go down? Can you go down? And when you're naturally down there, can you go back up to the big picture? Those are the major elements of a case interview, if you will. And obviously certain elements like, are you creative? Do you have good common sense? Really, it's a common sense thing, because common sense is not common at all. Common sense is an extraordinary rare commodity. Most people don't have common sense in that sense. And so that's really what it's about. So you can practice it a bit, but like doing 50 practice interviews doesn't help you at all. If you haven't figured it out after 4 or 5, then it's a waste of your time.
Thank you, Alex. I think we'll take one last question, which is from Roberto. I think this question is about culture in McKinsey, and it encompasses a few sub-questions like how easy is it to change offices between countries? How competitive is the job between colleagues? And is it true that, the up or out mantra is still around? It's about
yes.
culture.
So I'll start with the end. Yes, it's an up or out system. The focus is that we never want people, I don't know whether you're familiar with the Peter principle, but it's an organizational principle where you get promoted until you're no longer good enough to get promoted. And then you sit there. And over time, that means every position fills up with people who are not good enough to do the next job. And no consultancy wants that. So almost all consultancies, and McKinsey may have been the first to do that, they are up or out. If after 2 years, we don't think you'll make it to project manager, we'll ask you to leave. If after, and the time frames are not absolute, but if we see it's not going anywhere, we'll ask you to leave. If after another 2 years we don't think you can be, you are on a path to partner, which would make you associate partner, we'll ask you to leave. If you don't, if after max 7.5 to 8 years, until there are special circumstances like family, and McKinsey is extremely flexible. If you changed offices, or like there was a .com, like I was an associate partner in the .com crisis, all my clients just vanished on one day. So I was for 3 years an associate partner. It took a year longer, but they told me later I was never rated issues or concerns, because they say I was doing the right thing. It just the market was just not there yet at that point of time. Like the clients weren't there. But eventually, if we go, look, this guy will not be a partner, then we won't elect you. And then about 6 to 8 years later, kind of if we don't see you kind of grown to become a successful senior partner, you'll either stay like a partner. You can stay in certain subroles of partner. You can stay, but we'll ask you to be. So it's there, and it's designed so that it refreshes. Now that sounds very harsh. Most people leave before that time comes. Very, very, very few people. Maybe like McKinsey had a turnover, long-term average turnover is like 15% a year. People leave kind of 18, actually more 18%, 18% or so of people leave every year. And I think less than 2% or so were actually counseled to leave. The vast majority, if you're not good in this job, and it's not going where, you'll get dissatisfied yourself, and you're saying, I need a different job. This is not for me. I'm not enjoying this. And then you get countless job offers. And even those that are counseled to leave, very, very few of them will say bad things about McKinsey. it's our interest that this was a great experience, that you've learned a lot, and they'll say later on, this wasn't for me, but I'm deeply thankful that I was there. Like it's almost unheard of, like the alumni community and kind of how they feel about it. It's very rare, maybe 1 in 20, 1 in 30, that people saying that was a bad experience, or they didn't treat me right or whatnot, which is vastly different from like any other type of company. So the up or out is still around. What was the middle part of that question? Was
I think it was about competitiveness between
competitive. There is none. That was I hate competing. I like competing you compete to a standard. This is the beauty about it. Investment banking, for example, is very different. Investment banking is configured that they take in a lot of people, and the best 2 or 3 of the 100, or the best 10 of the 100 will survive to become partners, where you start making fantastic money, not just great money, and have that reputation. And there it's a competition. They know 2 will make it. For McKinsey and BCG and Bain, it's quite similar. If you're good enough to be a partners create their own clients, right? Or that's what a partner is. A partner creates opportunities for client service work. So if you're good enough to be a partner, you'll create your own you'll create your own work. So we've had years where partner elections, where like we used to be on a 6-month cycle, the average was 60, but then there would be a half year when it was 30, and then there would be a half year where it was 110. Like, and I've been on many review committees, including partner review committees. We do not rank, we do not anything like that. There is an absolute bar, and if you're good enough, you'll make it. And so I've never had any competition. On quite contrary, kind of collaboration is extensively documented. If I call up a partner I don't know in Kuala Lumpur, because I have a question, that person would get back to me within at most a day, typically within a few hours, and would spend an hour with me to help me solve my client problem, because all our incentives were about helping other people. McKinsey has figured out it's a little bit different at BCG, where it's more competitive, because there they compete. Like BCG partners get paid on the competition is among the partners, not among the associates. But partners get paid basically on how much work they do. That's not true on McKinsey. We don't get paid on how much work we do. We get paid on how much client impact we have and whether we're doing the right thing. So actually, the highest paid senior partner a couple of years ago was only busy on client work 10% of her time, because she was building something just completely amazing for the firm. And that's but other consultants go on billings and saying, well, you get 20% of the billings, and we don't do that. And there was a first part that I also forgot, of course.
I think you've answered that question, Alex.
Okay.
Maybe in offices, yeah.
Talking too much.
Maybe, so I promised that was the last question, but I think there's one more very interesting question from David, just to close the talk today. Could you speak about the importance of mentors, and how did you find one in your life? And what, as a mentee, could we do to make a productive relationship?
So I would not be where I was without mentors. And I talked about the feedback part below, right? A mentor is somebody who coaches you and advises you and helps you get better and helps you make the right decisions. And the way you get mentors is you ask them and you are open to what they say. And you don't always follow their advice, but you always consider it, and you don't tell them they were wrong or something like that, right? Now, mentors in McKinsey is easy. They come from a work context. You've worked with people, you both enjoyed working together, you talk obviously kind of private stuff as well. And over time they become advisors. And actually we would survey how many mentees each partner had, and like as an associate you can already be a mentor to others, and we would celebrate that. But it wasn't a formal thing, but they're informal social networks. And there's a higher level than mentor, which is sponsor. A sponsor is a mentor, but when things go badly for you, they are also the ones that saying, I like that guy, things went badly for him, but that wasn't Alex's fault. I'll create an opportunity for him because I happen to have one. So you need to seek, and everybody does badly occasionally. So you need mentors and sponsors in your life, and they can be at work, they can be outside work, they can be friends, but seek them out. because you don't never ever stop looking for coaching and feedback. The only way to make, for example, like many partners think they have arrived and they shouldn't. Now people should stop with their feedback, and those partners don't make senior partner. You only make senior partner because for the next 6 years, somebody sits you down every couple of weeks and says, Alex, what the heck were you thinking when you did this? Let me talk you through that.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much, Alex, for your time. It's now 6:30. We had scheduled the talk from 5 to 6:30. We know you're a very busy person. We appreciate so much the time that you gave us. It's been super helpful, and I'm sure that everyone else has learned a lot of new things and has hopefully clarified the path towards or decision towards making it to management consulting. So once again, thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you guys so much for organizing this, for getting such a large crowd on this thing. It's quite impressive. I wish folks at the University of Miami could corral a group of people like that. So it speaks for your own organization leadership skills there.
Awesome.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. And feel free to read out on Alex Quora. If you search for Alex Niemeyer, you'll see a lot of articles.
Yeah, Quora is going downhill. Quora is going down. So I haven't replied. I haven't answered anything yet because it's become all political and also. So I think Quora is dead. I still read it for entertainment, but I think it's dead as a platform. At least for me, it's dead.
So that means if you need any more question or refreshing ideas,
look,
check our YouTube.
If it's a specific question, and if you then I may. But also, I mean, Ed, if you get other questions from folks, I wish we had talked about this. And at some point of time next week, you want to send me an email with some collective thoughts or questions, I'm happy to record something quick or so if it's of interest.
That would be brilliant, Alex, because there was originally 139 people who signed up, but some of them say they have classes.
Yeah.
So I'll just aggregate and send to you if you don't mind. Well, awesome. Thank you so much once again, Alex, for coming, and we'll see you all in our next events.
Have a pint for me in the Eagle or the Granta.
Send some photos. All right. Bye-bye. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.